Welcome to the Employee Podcast episode. My name is Avery Pile, and I will be going over how Starbucks exploits the goodwill and positive attitude of their customers, and in doing so, they negatively affect their employees. I am a student at the University of Kentucky who loves to get a cup of Starbucks coffee on the regular. I also have experience working in the food industry, so I know how stressful it can be trying to get all the customers taken care of. Both of these connections to the Starbucks employee are the main reasons why I've taken an interest in researching how Starbucks treats their employees. I want to decide whether or not Starbucks deserves my business, because if they're going to mistreat their workers, that's not something I want to take part in. After lots of digging around in the aspects of working conditions, worker satisfaction, and wages, I am not too pleased with what I have found.
Hi, welcome to Starbucks. What can we get started for you?
To start off, the rate at which Starbucks pays their workers is pathetic. As I mentioned in our introductory episode, when juxtaposing the livable wage in Lexington, Kentucky, and the average wage Starbucks baristas get paid in Lexington, Kentucky, Starbucks employees are getting paid about $5 less than what they absolutely need to be able to live in society. So let's imagine a person living in Lexington. They get paid about $10 an hour at their barista job at Starbucks. They're severely struggling to make ends meet, and it's no shocker considering they are being paid more than $5 less than what they need to live. And this is only if this person doesn't have children, which is an unreasonable expectation. If this person has even just one child, the livable wage doubles, and the income they are being deprived of triples. They're being paid less than 1/3 of what they need to support themselves and their one child. And even one child is unreasonable, as most people want their child to have siblings. It just gets worse and worse as this person grows their family. So what does this person do? An article on NPR written by Andrea Sue called "Starbucks Workers Have Unionized at Record Speed, Many Fair Retaliation Now" shows how more than 250 Starbucks stores have unionized due to their poor working conditions and poor wages. Yes, this is what that person would do. 250 stores is alarming, and it shows how much further action is needed to combat this issue. Even though 250 stores is enough to show the general public and Starbucks that there's an issue, it's not enough to cause any effect. There are over 15,000 Starbucks stores in the entire United States, and 250 stores is less than 3%. If you think Starbucks is going to remediate their ways on a measly 3%, you're sadly mistaken. This is another problem accumulating, and it is even worse because it shows that there is not much progress when it comes to overcoming the problems Starbucks workers face. This article, written by Andrea Sue, was written back in October of 2022. However, about 4 months later in 2023, another article called "A Toxic Partner: How Starbucks is Using Understaffing to Try to Break the Union" came out in the Progressive magazine, claiming that Starbucks is intentionally understaffing their stores to get their workers to terminate their union. What blasphemy! Saurav Sarkar is the author of this article, and they write, "Dee Mata, which is a Starbucks employee, said that at her store, staffing went from as many as 27 workers at the time they filed to unionize down to 21 today, a roughly 20% drop." This article also shows a picture of a woman holding a sign that says, "Tell Starbucks the right to organize is a civil right," which is absolutely correct. Starbucks should not be retaliating this way, and I'm honestly surprised that they are, because wouldn't this hurt their business even more? This leads to my next point about how Starbucks negatively affects their employees, which is through the working conditions they provide them. Starbucks does not provide the best working conditions for their employees. This is mainly due to their lack of workers. If Starbucks wants to be petty by not staffing their stores, that's their decision. But who's going to staff the stores through rush hour? How do they think this is going to affect the customers when their drive-through line is leaking out of the parking lot? The poor employees that have staffed their stores have to suffer through these rush hours without any help. Rebecca Ferkshire, in her article called "Starbucks Employees Reveal the Worst Parts of Their Jobs," explains how after interviewing multiple Starbucks employees, she found out that they are overly stressed in their working environment. She explains that multiple Starbucks stores are severely understaffed, and therefore the spiked drive-through sales and rush hour demands are almost impossible to get through for the employees they do have. I know if I was a Starbucks employee working in these conditions, it would not take me long to pack my bags and move my working skills elsewhere, which could be another reason why lots of Starbucks locations are understaffed. If an employee decides to stay despite Starbucks cutting their hours, they'll eventually break when they can't stand the working environment for another second and get the heck out of Dodge. Another alarming aspect of Berkshire's article is that nowhere in the Starbucks 5-year plan does it address combating these issues. In fact, they plan to open thousands of new stores, creating lots of new jobs to fill. I think this is an idiotic business plan that could only lead to the fall of Starbucks economics. Before opening new stores, maybe they should consider how they're going to staff them, because they won't even staff the stores they have open now. This is just another problem the poor employees face when it comes to working at Starbucks. To make matters even worse, all Starbucks does is try to hide the reality of what goes on behind the scenes in Starbucks stores. From the evidence above, it is clear that Starbucks uses tyranny against their workers for economic gain. However, on a website written by Starbucks itself called Culture and Values, it says that their working environment is inclusive and warm, and their main value is viewing their workers as business partners who all succeed. This goes directly against what the interviewed workers said about their working conditions in the article I mentioned before, written by Berkshire. So not only is Starbucks mistreating their workers, they're covering it up with notions that couldn't be farther from the truth. This accusation I'm making against Starbucks is almost impossible to rebuttal, since this article is written by Starbucks itself, which makes it a primary source. I'm only using their own words, which unfortunately work against them. Lastly, when I was researching studies and scholarly articles about Starbucks and their coffee, I was very alarmed by the amount of negative findings against Starbucks. One study done by the European Management and Public Affairs found that Starbucks is one of the most wasteful coffee industries there are. The methods they use to farm their coffee beans are not sustainable and are expected to die out in the near future. This would slow the production of coffee and potentially take away jobs for many of their workers. This is how their poor farming strategy negatively affects their employees. Starbucks is well aware of this possibility. However, their efforts to combat waste are not good enough to eliminate the problem. In this episode, we have gone over how Starbucks exploits their customers and even their resources for their own economic gain. This negatively affects their workers in the form of poor working conditions and pay. This, of course, leads to the low employee satisfaction and unionized stores. Starbucks makes matters even worse by planning on opening more stores instead of fixing working conditions first, and harming the environment, which would inevitably lead to slowed coffee production and loss of jobs. The general public is unaware of this because of their excellent marketing strategies that hide the truth. If I were you, I would think twice before contributing to this heinous business, no matter how good their coffee may be.